Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Complying with the EU AI Act through ISO 42001, where we'll explore how organizations can align with the EU AI Act using the ISO 42001 framework for AI management. This discussion is essential for understanding how ISO standards can support regulatory compliance in today's evolving AI landscape. To guide us, we're joined by two experts who bring invaluable perspectives on AI governance and regulatory alignment. Kevin Schawinski is a Swiss astrophysicist with an extraordinary background, having worked at Oxford, Yale, and NASA. As a co-founder of Modulos AG, Kevin has transitioned his expertise to AI, focusing on creating governance frameworks for regulated AI environments. He also advises regulatory bodies, contributing to the US AI Safety Institute and the EU AI Office's Generative AI Code of Practice initiative. Together with us is also Marcus Schueler, Head of Responsible AI Consulting at MHP, a Porsche Company, who leads strategic initiative in responsible AI and corporate digital responsibility. With over 30 years of experience in digital transformation, AI ethics, and compliance, including executive roles like CIO at T-Mobile UK, Marcus provides a wealth of experience in aligning AI practices with regulatory frameworks, particularly the EU AI Act. Thank you, Kevin and Marcus, for joining us today. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
Thank you for having us.
To start it off, I'm going to introduce you to TRECCERT. TRECCERT is dedicated to providing high-quality training and certification programs designed to meet the needs of professionals and organizations around the world. Our mission centers on enhancing the career prospects of our community members by guiding them towards recognized certifications that demonstrate their professional competencies. At TRECCERT, integrity is at the core of our relationships with our trainers, partners, certified individuals, and clients. This foundation allows us to deliver exceptional services through a blend of expertise and innovation. Next slide, please. TRECCERT has a rich portfolio, which includes training and certifications in compliance management, information security, environmental management, business continuity, and of course, artificial intelligence management, which is particularly relevant for today's webinar. Next slide. In the AI space, TRECCERT offers a range of ISO 42001 certification programs, including the ISO 42001 practitioner and lead implementer certifications. These programs are designed to give professionals a comprehensive understanding of AI management systems based on the ISO IEC 42001 standard. Now, we're going to dive into the topic of complying with the EU AI Act through the ISO 42001 standard, starting with the overview of requirements and controls within ISO 42001. I'm going to give the word to Kevin to guide us through this part of the webinar.
Thank you very much. So, the most important thing to understand about ISO 42001 is what it is and what it is not. So 42001 is a management system standard that's international. So by definition, it's a standard that you're supposed to be able to use in many different environments, jurisdictions, locations, and types of applications, as long as you're using an AI system as part of your business. Now, if you're familiar with other types of management systems, like a 27001, then the structure of 42001 is not going to be a surprise to you. But it's worth delving a little bit into its structure and what it's made up of, like what are its constituents. Because particularly if you are familiar with other management systems, it's also important to highlight the difference here. So something I've been asked about a lot is, can we just take an information management system like a 27001 ISMS and change some controls and then have a 42001? And the answer to that is no, because you're dealing a very, very different domain. Information security and AI operate very, very differently. And so this is why 42001 exists in the first place. So if we go to the next slide, you can see this structure. You can see the structure, which of course has been standardized by ISO into how a management system is supposed to be built up. And here you can see this is all things that are independent of this question of what AI is and how it operates, right? It gives you that, as they call it, the high-level structure. This is the similarity to other AI management systems. Though, of course, if we then go to the next slide, the content looks very different. And so the requirements and controls that you're going to have to build up as part of your 42001 AI management system look very different. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence. You can still see the link to that general management system structure, but you see some things here like AI risk assessment. Now, you may have done risk assessments before for specific verticals, for example, a credit risk or cybersecurity risk assessment. AI risk assessments are very, very different things because the risks of AI systems are different in nature. They're broader. They can pop up in ways that are different from other domains. And the things you can do about them, because you're dealing with an AI system, such as maybe retraining a model or applying guardrails, those look very, very different. And so you can see here in this overview the kinds of things, the kinds of processes, and the kinds of capabilities that an AI management system expects you to implement. Now, you can see the content is different from a 27001, right? And the things that you're supposed to implement are not just cut and paste where we change the name. It is very much geared towards meeting the needs of an organization working with AI and trying to treat and mitigate the risks that come from operating AI at all levels. Maybe one thing to stress is this goes all the way into the supply chain, like what are you buying, what are you licensing from vendors, to how do you deal with the risks that are caused by your own products, your own AI product, down the line with your customers and your partners. So the AI management system 42001 allows you to manage this process end to end in a standardized way. So if we go to the next slide, we see this list of things, these list of controls as they go through the AI system lifecycle, which is, I think, particularly important. Starting from, do you have the right policies? Do you have the right organization to manage AI end to end? Do you have the resources? There's a section here about assessing impacts from AI systems. This is something that I think is significantly underestimated right now, because there really isn't a good standardized way yet to assess the impact of AI systems. There's a standard related to 42001, which is 42005, which gives you a template for how to perform such an assessment, but there's not a rich practice of doing these impact assessments. The question of data for AI systems is also going to be a very, very important one. We'll probably get into that later, because not only are these AI-specific questions, but then you start to have an overlap to data governance, data management, and then, of course, privacy. And then, of course, you go into the questions that go into human oversight all the way to these third-party relationships, so your vendors and your customers. How do you address the challenges of operating AI systems in such an environment? And 42001, as I said, gives you this standardized way of managing and controlling the entire process end to end. Thank you.
Now we're going to have Marcus give us his insights on the core elements of the EU AI Act. Marcus, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, let's start with the first slide, where we just give an overview what was really the purpose and what is the framework of the EU AI Act. And yeah, it's safe and ethical use, but really the headline was trustworthy AI. Now, it was about protecting human rights, but also it's a lot about quality, what is one of the main pillars really of trustworthy AI. You will see this later also in detail. The EU Act entered in force on the 1st of August 24, actually 1 year later than expected. But you all can remember the ChatGPT moment when it's come up and it's made a mess out of the whole process of the AI Act. They had really to think about, to rethink about everything because they haven't had it on the radar. And the first approach was that they said, well, all the general purpose system will be high risk, and a lot of discussion going on. And so we, at the end of the day, we have been 1 year later, and it will, we will be busy with it till the 2nd of August 27. Most people are looking at 26, and we will see on the next slides where are the deadlines are. So what you see here are the key elements of the EU AI Act. And I think it's important to understand that this slide, there's a really totally different dimensions. So the first one is that the EU Act is based on, and I think Kevin has mentioned this already, is based on a risk-based approach. So every AI system or product within AI is really evaluated by their possible risk. And the next one you see is already one category of risk. It's a high risk. And on the other hand, you have here points like where the EU has tried to consider and to push innovations in Europe. It's the regulatory sandboxes. And we go down to penalty and fines. And so we will have to cover what sort of roles we have in the AI Act. And all of these points we will now have a look on in a more structured way, and we go a little bit deeper. So next slide, please. So start with the risk-based approach. And here you see the four main risk categories, starting with the unacceptable risk, also called the forbidden system at the end of the day, where things are into like social scoring, it's real-time biometric categorization. So all those things which are really forbidden from a European point of view, which does not really match with our fundamental rights. And the next category is high-risk systems. And here you will see, if you look in the details, that most of them really are more covering systems which belongs to local authorities, and there are just a few of them really down to something what companies or enterprises are doing in practice. And the limited risk is just dealing more or less with transparency. I think this is something what came up also, especially with the general purpose AI development. So talking about chatbots, they are so good today that people maybe can think or don't realize I'm dealing with a human or I'm dealing with an AI. And the whole idea of transparency is here that everything what is AI content, might be a chatbot, video, audio, or other content, the user has to be informed about it, that he is dealing either with an AI directly or with an AI content. And then we have the minimal or no risk. All of you know them. Spam filter is, I think, the best example. So there's not too much risk. Looking here, I think we can also talk about the deadlines. And thank that we have started, went in force on 1st August now of 24. It's the first deadline is already 6 months later, so it's the 2nd February of 25, where all the systems with unacceptable risk must be stopped. So it's also really important to follow them because they are the highest fee. We're talking about 7% of the global revenue if companies fail really to get out or to stop a forbidden system. So far they have one in place. I'm working with some customers together. I haven't met one yet, but on the other hand, you really have to follow this process and have to be sure that you don't have any system with unacceptable risk there. Then what is here on this slide missing, but we will cover this later, is the general purpose AI, where we have 1 year time. In 1 year time, so it's the 2nd August of 25, all the general purpose requirements must be fulfilled. And high risk is really what most people are looking on, or what is the most prominent deadline. It's the 2nd August of 26, where all the processes, requirements to the system, to the products, but also to the organization has to be fulfilled. And you have seen on the slide before that we said, well, but it ends on the, more or less, it ends on the 2nd August of 27. This is because they differentiate again between high-risk systems and high-risk systems within products. So there's 1 year, you have 1 year more time to manage this. So that's about the deadlines you have to deal with for all these categories. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So starting with high risk, what does it mean? When we talk about high risk system, again, we are dealing here on different levels. One is simply you can really separate it in organizational level and maybe a use case level. When we talk about use case level, this is also sometimes confusing. The AI Act talks about system, but one system can contain, again, some use cases. And what is important, when you make your risk assessment, you really have to look at each of these use cases. To make this assessment, you need a risk management system. This means you are here really on an organizational level where you have to put up your processes, your governance mechanism, and of course, you need a good governance tool, which also maybe will cover already those regulatory AI, which is in the pipe, let's say from the US. Well, we don't know if there's some coming anymore, but China, India, etc. Data governance. This is, for example, important when we talk about bias, what is always a big issue by high-risk systems. When we talk about recruiting processes, discrimination, what is mainly really triggered by bias, then we are on the use case system level. When we talk about robustness, accuracy, and cybersecurity, here you will have to check also with data security, where are already processes in place which are covering those things. And I think Kevin mentioned already, when we talk about the ISO, there are also the ISO 27 series, where most companies are certified today. And what you will see is that there are a lot of measures already in place in those areas. I think what is important to understand is that this risk-based approach for the use case, it starts really with the design phase and goes over the whole life cycle. This means that we also have to cover the post-market monitoring. Why is this important? Just to make it one example. Again, let's go back to discrimination. We have a model in the recruiting system. It's tested. We are fine with the algorithm, with the model, with the data, so they are bias-free. The point is that they are self-learning. And maybe in 1 year or 1.5 years, you have a data drift or a model drift, and they are not any longer really discrimination-free. So you have really to cover this over the whole lifetime. Incident reporting, a very important point. Always, in each case, when you have some sort of incident, you have really to get in contact with the authorities, because if you don't, there's another fee. What not always is so transparent for everyone, is 1% of the global revenue, what is also a lot of money, and this is again an important point. So this is more or less what high-risk system has to cover. And if you have a look at this, how much is about ethics and how much is about quality, if you really have a look at it. And from my point of view, it's more or less a no-brainer that you have to do this anyway if you are developing responsible or solid AI systems, because just belongs to a high-quality product that all those things are really covered. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, here again, the just mentioned the transparency requirements for the limited risk AI system. The IEC is not really talking about limited risk, but this is has become common. And again, we have here chatbots, video, and all the time when really people can think, or that it can be mistaken that they're not dealing with real people, you have to get this transparency requirements in place. Here's also emotion recognition, but we must be careful with this one. So it's mentioned in the article for transparency, but it also belongs somehow to systems which are high risk. So this is really something, if you put on your requirements, you must be really careful that you cover it both. And prohibited AI practice, we talked about it already, social scorings and exploiting vulnerabilities, groups, children. If you ask me, TikTok could be a case. People have to look at it when we talk about addictive algorithm, etc. Well, I'm curious how they will handle this one. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So here we come to the general purpose system. Again, this section is really new in the AI Act. They put it in later. And what you see here, the requirements are those for provider. So let's say OpenAI for ChatGPT. And the EU has split them in two categories of requirements. Ones are on the left side are requirements every general purpose AI provider has to fulfill. And on the right hand, you see those which has to be fulfilled just for general purpose systems with a systemic risk. What is a systemic risk? So the EU had made its decision that it's 10 to the power of 25 flops needed for training. So where is this number coming from? Nobody knows really. And to be honest, it's just a political decision. Because at this time, Europe was still trying to protect smaller European large language model developer like Aleph Alpha or Mistral, which has not used or not needed so much power. And so it was more or less a protection of the market. More problem is that they still evaluating what else could be a systemic risk. And they working on a code of practice, and what can took up to 9 months. So when we have 1 year really time to be aware of what that the general purpose AI systems, what sort of requirements they have. And just 3 months before, we really know what the systemic risk is. So this is a sort of issue. But the most important thing to understand is that you can't lean back just as a user and say, well, that's fine, my purchase department will deal with this via the terms and conditions, and this is something just what the general purpose provider has to deal with. And because the point is, and here is one of the things where the AI is really very, or not clear, let's put this way. What they say is, when you're using a general purpose system, what you start to make, for example, some fine-tuning to the model, and they didn't describe what fine-tuning is really, it might be that you change your role from a user to a provider. And from one day to the other, you must fulfill all these requirements. So if you go for the AI Act, you have to be prepared for that you might change this role and that you can fulfill these requirements. Same applies to the high risk. Yeah, from my experience, maybe 2 or 3% of the use cases in a company will be a high risk. However, you have to be prepared for it, and this means it's 90% of the effort of the requirements are just covered by high risk, and most companies won't really have to deal with it. However, you have to be prepared for this. Okay, so far so general purpose AI requirements. Next slide, please. Conformity assessment. This is the one when we talk about the risk management, that we make our risk assessment. You have to find the right place in your development processes where you put it in. Idle place would be before the design phase, and at the end, when the product goes live, it needs a sort of conformity stamp. And there are 2 ways how this conformity can work. If it's for AI systems outside of a product, you can do it on your own. The companies have the possibility, they just confirm that their product or that their system is confirmed in regard to the EU AI Act, that the process is in place, etc. But if it's a product with safety critical components, you need an external auditor. So this is a major difference here. So AI regulatory sandboxes, again, it's one mechanism the EU will use to push innovations, because it's a safe environment where you can try everything under the control of the EU. They can advise you, and again, it's one of the tools they provide to accelerate the whole process. Governance and oversight, again, it's not for the company. Here we talk about what has the EU really to do. And the first step was to open also on the EU level AI office. I think it's 3 months old now, maybe 4 months, I don't know really. And in the next steps, we do need this on every national level, that they have something similar like the EU AI office to deal on national level with it. So now code of conduct, again, different dimension, and code of conduct is more or less a voluntary thing companies can do, but what is strongly recommended from the EU. It's what you might know from as an AI ethic guideline, because this is what it's dealing with. And many companies have already this AI ethic guidelines in place, and it's dealing with fairness, with explainability, with transparency, with accountability, but also with all the quality things we talked about, like accuracy, robustness, safety. And so you get a whole toolbox really of requirements. There are best practice recommendation from the EU, from the OECD. And actually, I can't imagine that companies put the AI Act in place without considering the code of conduct. It might be even a good idea to start with it, but this is with other customers. And so you have something voluntary, and you can a little bit play with it and get already your processes right. You can always you can already look what sort of systems might match your governance requirements. So code of conduct, from my point of view, a good thing. Yeah, penalties and fines, we talked about it. 1%, 3%, and 7%. It depends on really the risk category. And yeah, summarize, focus on fundamental rights, but from my point of view, really to protect the fundamental rights, you need a certain level of quality in the AI system. This is and transparency and protection of fundamental rights with the right purpose will be then the result. Okay, if I remember right, this was already the last one to, no, was not, okay. Of course, we're off the roads. No, please go ahead. Next slide. Yeah, fine. So we have different roles in the AI Act. And what you see here are provider and user, but they're more, they're deployer, they're importer. And all the roles have different obligations to fulfill. And the most ones are really live with the providers. So if you provide an high-risk system, you have really to fulfill the whole requirements list you have seen before. It's, I think, something between 8 to 12 topics. It depends on how you summarize them. And if you look at the user side, it seems to be less. And yes, indeed it is. But most cases, as soon you're developing AI on your own, you will have both roles. So on one hand, you're a provider and you're a user, and you have to fulfill really both requirements. So international cooperation is, again, it's not for the companies here. It means that we have a sort of umbrella for the in regards of standards and norms. And I think this is now the perfect step to have a look at the norms and standards on the next slides or chapter. So we started with it. Why is it not sufficient just to consider the 4201? And we will talk about some of the reasons for it. Maybe, but have a look first on why do we need norms and standards anyway? So the AI Act is just giving a frame for the what. So what is it about? What do we have to regulate? They talk about risk management, etc., but they don't go really into the how. And the international norms and also European norms, they are going to a detailed level and really describing the how. And this is the mechanism how the AI Act is built on. And this is also the reason why in May 2023, the European Commission has mandated already the European norms and standards, like then or Senelec, to develop those kind of standards. However, what I found out is that it's much more complex than expected, because as Kevin said already, this is not really just, don't get it wrong, this is just not about like security, AI brings in much more dimensions. And so what they do expect now is that they will maybe end up in late 25. And I talked to one of the leaders of the initiative, and they said actually they're expecting that we are in early 2026, that we do have the European norms. What will be far too late. Now, if you're really working with an international company, it's almost it's a joke really. Yeah, it would leave you with 6 months or maybe 5 months to get it done. And believe me, if you have started now to implement the AI, it's getting already tight because it is a complex business. So you need to find another way how you can do that. However, the EU Act has recommended really that ISO and IEC should be considered to speed up the whole process of implementing the AI Act. So there will be, there will be also integrated in it. So next page, please. So the concrete job of the European Commission was about 10 concrete aspects of AI the European standards should be covered. And if you have a look at them, and if you remember what we've seen on the high risk, it's almost the same. And later on, I think when Kevin will cover the other part, you will see it's also almost the same. Yeah? So there's a huge coverage of them, and I don't go now through all of them again because I think this will be covered again later. What was the key attributes from the EU in the direction of the European standards? It should be tailored to the objectives of the AI Act. Of course, it must fit to, it should be safe, it should be ethical, it should have the quality objectives, it should be trustworthy. And now this is a major difference to the ISO norm. It's oriented to the AI systems and products. It's not so much about the organization, but it's really down to each use case. Of course, you need an organization around it, but the whole point is really that they look down on the use case level. And because this means also that you need other requirements which goes in the product level, how you have to design this, and what sort of requirements it needs. So then it has to be sufficiently precise and clear, yeah, of course, because this is the problem we have currently with the AI Act. Everything is into it, but it's so vague that you can't really put the AI Act in practice because you don't know really the detail level. Then applicable across sectors and systems. This does not mean business sectors. This means computer vision, natural language processing. So the AI Act approach is that it should meet all these sectors and all these applications. Aligned with the state of the art was the point really this came up with, let's put it with one word, the general purpose systems. Because there are no really international standards so far on it, and this is something what they expect also from the European standard offices, and of course cohesive and complementary. All right, so these are the key attributes, and let's go a slide ahead. So, short summary, why it's not enough really to go ahead with ISO 42001. It's mainly really about the difference between organization and system and products. And but why it is still a very, very good idea to do that, we can see on the next slides. To go ahead. So just put two reasons, or two main reasons, why it's a good idea to consider the for 2001. And the first one is that it will really shorten your implementation time, and it gives the project a stable framework. And if you start from scratch with something like the EU AI, what has a high complexity, you need some sort of structure you can follow. And I think that the ISO norm give you really good structure to do that, even if it's not down to the product, but the overall main columns, points, and topics will meet your requirements here. Then a lot of the high risk requirements are already covered. Not to 100% maybe, but it's enough when you have the 70 or 80, because you will see later on that this plays out. The international harmonization beyond the EU is already taking place. There will come more. They are all just getting currently the ducks in a row. Again, it's China, it's India, it's UK, it's Singapore, it's Switzerland, it's US. So they all planning somehow sort of regulation. And I think the ISO as an international standard is something you can get prepared quite well for all what's coming up. Then you have, of course, experience in the market. Yeah, with ISO standards. There are ways you can get certified. There are a lot of consultants in the area. Really to find good consultants currently who has implemented the AI Act. Not so many around like who can help you really to bring up a good ISO standards. And of course, there's the interlinking with other standards like the 27 series, because security will stay an issue. There are some different requirements with AI, like data poisoning and model evasion. But however, I think you will see that with the 27 series, you are quite well prepared. And I think what is really important is that they are integrated. So in summary, I think it makes sense just from a project management, you get make a major step ahead or in the direction of quality. And the second reason will be on the next slide. And this is, please do not use the AI just to get compliance, because it can be much more, and it can really help you to achieve your strategic goals. And you see, Kevin, the headline in his back is responsible AI. I think this is what we're talking about. I can imagine that in the future, responsible AI will be AI. And the implementation of the AI Act, to be frank, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of money. So use it, get the most out of it. And if you maybe put 10% more effort in it, you have really the chance to get a framework to put on your AI strategy, to have the right governance. Because if you go today in companies, and let's go back to the first requirement of the AI, the high risk, the forbidden systems, where the timeline is really quite tight because it's always already the 2nd Feb of 25. And if you go into the companies and say, okay, so what we have to do is we have to check your AI systems if they fulfill those sort of requirements for forbidden systems. And most of the companies will say, we don't know where we have AI systems. Now they are all over the place, especially when you have it in products and in the enterprise and in other areas and their subsidiaries. And you have no low-code platforms in a sudden way. You can also develop AI. So most of the companies are not able to tell you how many and what sort of AI systems they do have. So most of the projects really start with an inventory. And this is something what is really not the best way how to use AI in a strategic way. And I think this could be one of the points where the AI Act can really help you. Genau. And the next point is the same. It's not enough just to focus on products and systems. Of course, you will be compliant then, but if you're doing this, there's such strong interlink with the organization structure and governance that it's more or less for me, it's a no-brainer that you have to do it. And therefore, really following the ISO is really a good idea. Then, this is my personal opinion. I think that the responsible AI certification or ISO certification will become a must, similar to the 27 series. So I can imagine that in 3 years' time, there will be a company who is not forced to get those kind of certification. So, and last one, I think that you are much more flexible also in the direction of the global regulation and which is coming up. And just to mention it, there are also really some good other models, standards. It's like the NIST from the US for responsible AI, what is really worthy to have a look at it. And if you make a combination of ISO and NIST, I think you can be quite sure that you're on the right way to get a high quality strategic governance framework for your company, and waiting for the EU norms, and you can close the delta and you're perfect prepared for the complying to the AI Act, but also to achieving your strategic AI goals. So I think, Kevin, now it's back to you.
Thank you very much. And I mean, I want to echo a lot of things that you just said about how these types of certifications, particularly 42001, are going to be a must, and how they will become the standard to do business. In fact, I know several large tech companies are already reached out to their own vendors, suppliers, that they must present their 42001 to them actually on a very short deadline in order to remain vendors. So given the amount of work that's involved in setting up an AIMS, as you say, there's not a lot of time left to get ready here. Maybe if we go to the next slide, I will just talk a little bit. No, never mind. Sorry, one back. Say a little bit about where I'm coming from here. So my company, we build an AI management system. We see a platform that would allow you to implement the processes that originally we derived from the AI Act in its approach to product liability, but then of course also ISO 42001, and then some of the other standards that you mentioned, like the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. And so what we did is we actually broke down these different frameworks into atomic controls that could be reused across as many as possible. And so this is what we're going to talk about now, is what is the overlap between this law, the AI Act, and the technical standard 42001, for which you can get certified now. And of course, as you mentioned, the harmonized standards from the EU that you could get certified against, those are missing. Those are not ready. And so 42001 really is the only international standard that's ready right now. That doesn't mean it's a perfect match. It's a good match, but it's not a perfect match. And I'll just go over some of the differences that we spotted, and of course others have spotted between the two. Namely that, first of all, that ISO is an organizational standard. It's an AI management system. It's supposed to take the perspective of how does an organization deal with AI. Whereas the AI Act is a product liability law. It takes a primary view on the AI system. The ISO standard is international. It's supposed to be useful in many different locations and jurisdictions, whereas, of course, the AI Act is specifically based in EU law. So when we talk about questions like ethics and discrimination, they are much more explicit in the AI Act than they are in ISO, which basically says you should take measures for it, whereas the AI Act is much more clear there. In general, the ISO standard, by its nature, is lighter on specifics than the AI Act, which often has requirements that go into which office you need to notify for what. Another major difference, and you already highlighted this, is that the AI Act has this risk tiering. So we've all seen the pyramid now many, many times. The ISO standard does not have any risk tiering. From the perspective of 42001, all your AI applications should be managed in line with the policies of your AI management system. And there's no explicit differentiation between high risk and low risk in that. We analyzed in detail the overlap of our atomic controls between those two frameworks. And the overlap is high, it's about 60%, but of course it's not complete. So there are things in ISO that the AI Act doesn't cover, but more importantly, there are many things that the AI Act talks about, and those are the specifics mostly in dealing with processes with the EU that of course are not in ISO. Also important is, of course, the ISO standard is auditable. You can get a certification right now. The AI Act does not have harmonized standards yet, and so you can not get the same level of external validation than you can with 42001 right now. This, by the way, is also true of the NIST AI risk management framework, which is also a very, very good framework. You can implement it, but you can't really get a certification against it. That makes ISO 42001, and I echo completely what you just said earlier, Marcus. It's the best basis on which to build because it covers a lot of ground and it's generic. So if you want to look ahead and say, oh, I'm going to have to deal with the AI Act. I also maybe want to operate in the United States and maybe other countries as well. A 42001 AI management system is a very good basis to be ready for that, even if it might not fulfill all the requirements that you're going to have to meet. It's an excellent basis. And you see this in this overview here, where the mapping between the ISO standard and the chapters, the articles of the AI Act are listed. And so we'll go through these now. And so if you go to the next slide, in Article 9, the risk management system that the AI Act expects is defined. And this is a good alignment with 42001, and then specifically also ISO 23894, which is referenced heavily in 42001, which outlines the process of AI risk management. And this is something I stress a lot because I hear from people, well, we already have a risk management system, right? We were a financial services institution. We have a risk management system for credit. And the answer to that is like, yes, that's undoubtedly true, but an AI risk management system looks very different from one that is designed for a specific industry vertical. And you can see the outline here of the process you're supposed to follow. And the thing that's maybe less obvious about it is that, of course, this is a completely horizontal risk management process, right? It doesn't tell you, oh, if you have this ratio of loan to income or whatever, then it's a bad risk, right? It tells you you have to proactively identify the risks posed by your system, whether it's about employment or credit or scoring student homework, right? There's no specifics in there. It's a completely horizontal risk management system. And there's actually pretty good alignment between 42001 and what the AI Act expects here. Let's go to the next slide. The data and data governance article, Article 10 of the AI Act, is very, very interesting. And here we really see in a fantastic example the overlap, but also the difference between the two, because 42001 gives you a clear framework on how to deal with questions like we're listing here data quality and bias mitigation. But of course, being an international technical standard doesn't go into any depth on what that means. What does bias mean and what are you supposed to do here? The AI Act also doesn't go into tremendous depth, but of course it references EU law, right? It talks about which fundamental rights you're supposed to work towards. There's also, by the way, mentions of the overlap and potentially even conflict with GDPR here, and that's another fascinating topic. But that's probably going too deep for this general overview. So let's move on to the next slide. Yep. So also in Article 10, we have this traceability and auditability. This is essential. You have to maintain a track record of how your model, how your system actually was built, what decisions went into it, how was it built, maintained, and updated throughout the entire AI lifecycle. This is reflected in both of them actually incredibly well. Looking at Article 17, the data governance, here again, the two frameworks are similar. The AI Act goes into more depth than 42001, but also has some more specifics, whereas 42001 gives you a general outline of what's expected here. Next slide, please. I'm conscious of the time. So one thing that's stressed very much in the AI Act, and that is going to be very, very important as you prepare your product if it's high risk, is the technical documentation. There's a very detailed list for the technical documentation of your high risk system must include. And there's a significant amount of disclosure that's going to have to go on here on how the system was made, how it was trained, what its limitations are, et cetera, et cetera. 42001 is a bit looser here. Yes, it gives you a good outline, but it doesn't really have the force of law mandating what you must disclose here to your users. It's a sort of best practice guide. The traceability and explainability, I mean, these are simply best practices that are outlined by both. But of course, again, when you look at the AI Act, there are some hooks into other laws and new obligations where you need to be careful that you actually meet this requirement. Whereas in 42001, it gives you sort of a general recommendation on how you should do that. Next slide, please. So these comparisons here go into the sort of processes that you're supposed to implement. The AI Act really talks here about your AI system. So specifically for your AI system, how do you maintain compliance? How do you maintain transparency? How do you report incidents? These are very much system tied, whereas in ISO 42001, it's talking more about how your organization handles these processes. These are, of course, not in some sort of conflict, deep conflict, but they do take a slightly different approach here. Though my take on these here and actually in general is if you do what ISO 42001 recommends, you're in very good shape for the specific requirements for the AI Act. Let's keep going here. Human oversight is an extremely important requirement of the AI Act. And there are not too many details on what that really means. It has sort of a general overview of what the expectation here is, and then actually 42001 gives you more detail on how you might set up those roles and processes dealing with the human oversight and the roles and responsibilities required. So this is actually a place where ISO 42001 is very useful in helping you set up that system. Same with monitoring. I think 42001, but also the risk management standard give you a bit more detail, whereas the AI Act generally just requires you to perform the real-time monitoring of the system and to have humans looking at that process and making sure risks are mitigated. Let's keep moving. Human in the loop and human on the loop are very, very important. The AI Act is very clear on what the expectation here is. ISO 42001 has sort of best practice recommendation that it's a good idea to have a human in the loop. But particularly on the AI Act side, this is something that is going to be taken very, very seriously. Same with the training of the operators, right? Again, 42001 gives you a good process for what you should be doing here. But on the AI Act side, this is something you really need to document to demonstrate that you actually meet this. Let's keep moving. These are the Article 15 requirements, and those are very interesting to me because they define some terms, the robustness, the accuracy, and the errors and malfunctions. It's really interesting to me in the AI Act how something actually quite technical has been codified in law on what is expected of an AI system. Again, the level of detail is not too great. So if you're looking for a technical manual on what kind of accuracy in your system is really required, you're not going to find answers there. You won't find them in 42001 either, but you find a bit more into the kinds of detail in the kinds of steps you could be taking to try and meet those requirements. Now, what's interesting here in the robustness, and actually if we go to the next slide, I believe, are the cybersecurity risks. And so the AI Act talks about cybersecurity and protecting against adversarial attacks. The AI Act is actually very forward-looking here because we're not just talking about quote-unquote traditional cybersecurity, which of course we're already all struggling with the attacks we're under. It specifically talks about AI cybersecurity. So there are ever-evolving attacks, not just prompt injections, but also things like model inversions and things like that can be used to expose data, steal models, or cause other types of harm and damage. And that is something that the Act actually requires you to do. And this is going to be a really hard moving goal because both the attacks are going to evolve very, very fast, and the best practices are also going to change very, very fast. So if you think this is something you set up once, that's unlikely how it's going to pan out. This is going to be a running battle that will never be won. Let's keep moving. Here we talk about the things you are obligated to do in the AI Act once you put the system on the market. You should have certain processes where you have obligations towards the users, but also the people you resell or license the system to. They're very specific processes in the case of the EU. And as in many other things we've covered here, the ISO standard basically talks about general things you ought to do in order to inform your stakeholders and your customers. Here I see somewhat of a divergence between the two. If you want to operate in the EU market, you need to have very specific things set up in order to satisfy these. Next slide, please. So here we have the summary between the major articles and parts of the AI Act and how ISO 42001 meets them. So I'll summarize again what I said, and also, of course, what Marcus covered. There's a good overlap between the two. They're not the same. 42001 is a technical standard that's international, that's generic. The AI Act is an EU law that you're obligated to follow, and that has some clear specifics that apply obviously only to the EU. And based on that overlap, but also those differences and the fact that we don't have the EU harmonized standards yet and won't have them for a while, 42001 is really the only game in town in order to get your organization ready. And while I've now seen some organizations achieve 42001 very, very fast, this is something that we try to facilitate with our platform. We helped one startup get ready for audit in under a month. Generally, and in particular, if you're in a larger business, getting to 42001, to your phase 1 and phase 2 audits, is going to be a substantial amount of work. And if you think the AI Act deadlines are far in the future, they're not, because you need to get the work done, and then you need to have the audits done. And if you have a high-risk system, simply to remain on the market, you have less than 2 years to get all of this done end to end. And so if you want to start today, I recommend starting with 42001. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Marcus. Mindful of the time, we will take a few questions because we have received quite a few questions on the chat. We will select some of them so that we can go through them together. First, we have a question from Ken Soko. He's interested in knowing the difference between unacceptable risk and high risk. So I think the question is more related to the EU AI Act. So either Marcus or Kevin, whoever wants to tackle this question, feel free to.
Yeah, it's well, actually, it really depends on the use case, and it's just a different class of risk. And the unacceptable risk is really seen as something what is so contrary to the fundamental rights in Europe that it's just not allowed, like the mass surveillance, where you have real-time biometric categorization. Social scoring is something what does not fit in the EU value framework, and really manipulation of vulnerable groups. Those are things which are simply forbidden. And high-risk systems, they're okay, but they coming along with risk. And a high risk is, for example, discrimination. And this, I think, this is a difference, because you can discrimination, you can do something about it that the system works fine. Yeah, social scoring is something you can do what you want to because the intent is already wrong.
I think it's very. I think organizations need to take this very, very serious, because a fine under the prohibited category is very substantial. 35 million euros is 7% of revenue. And the category that is, I think, throwing up the most questions, and I have to clarify, I'm not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, right?
No.
But the prohibited category has, one of them is the real-time emotion detection and manipulation. And there are plenty of softwares right now that could potentially fall under that. And so given the short deadline, I encourage everyone, talk to a qualified legal counsel about every single tool you're using right now and see if you actually might be deploying a prohibited system.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We have another question from Anissa. She's interested to know if ISO 42001 ensures compliance with data protection and privacy requirements, particularly for high-risk AI systems, or does it take into consideration?
it takes it into consideration, but it does not ensure it. And I think that this is also mirrored in the AI Act, where it actually delineates itself clearly against GDPR. The two overlap and the two can be in conflict. And so simply following one, whether it's the AI Act or ISO 42001, does not in any way guarantee that you're meeting your obligations towards GDPR, CCPA, or any of the other data privacy laws in the world.
We have quite an interesting question actually coming from Mark. He's interested to know for high-risk AI systems, so the EU Act mandates a conformity assessment. Marcus, you covered this part during the presentation. He's interested to know how does 42001 align with these requirements, and are there any suggested methodologies for performing these assessments, the conformity assessment for high-risk AI systems?
Actually, this kind of assessment is not covered by the ISO, because it's really, I think it's something new that you have to do this assessment on a horizontal layer, that you really look at the system on the product, and this is not what ISO is covering. They are covering really risk management system on a higher level, which you have also to integrate in the enterprise risk management. But this specific risk assessment has to be done new, and it has to be proved by legal. Yeah. So this is really, really important. This to put this questionnaire on with legal advice. Don't do it on your own. It can be really massive expensive.
I completely agree. This is not captured right now at all. We have to wait for guidance from the EU what these assessments really should look like. But I would stress, and this goes in in favor of a 42001 AI management system, which is that at least in principle, most of or all of the information required to perform the conformity assessment should be registered in the system. So my hypothesis is that, again, we have to wait and see what the EU really expects here, will be a rearrangement or a editing of the information that should be available on that system to provide a specific kind of output report.
Thank you both of you. We keep receiving endless questions as we speak. Another question coming from Jos van der Wiest, and he's interested to know about the definition of AI systems. He says that he thinks that they're a bit vague, and is there any AI techniques or methods that fall under the definition of artificial intelligence under the EU AI Act? So what kind of AI methods fall under the definition of artificial intelligence under the EU AI Act?
Actually, from my experience, most of the companies are really struggling with this. This is one of the first questions when we ask them what sort of AI systems you have in place. I say, what is an AI system? And so all the definitions I'm not really happy with. What we have done for our customers, we have built up a decision tree, really. So you have question for question you can walk through, and at the end, you know if you have an AI system or not. But again, this is something you might even have to check with legal again. So you need really technical know-how here to get it done, and check at the box from legal to find out if it's really an AI system.
I think the definition of AI was one of the most controversial parts in the passage of the AI Act. The definition that the EU uses, that the OECD uses, and similar definitions now also in the United States, they're very broad. And the word AI really leads people astray here, because when we now hear AI, we think ChatGPT. But under the definition of AI that's in the law, many systems that none of us would really call AI or machine learning are likely covered. And so every company is using AI today, is using AI systems today. They may not be aware of it, right? This is why they should do an inventory, as Marcus suggests. but they're almost certainly using them. And the real challenge, in my view, of the AI Act is that especially large enterprises have legacy systems that may be 10, 20, 30 years old, written in languages that young graduates don't even learn anymore, that nobody thinks of as AI systems, suddenly are not just AI systems, but high-risk AI systems. And in order to get those to the point where you can have the conformity assessment, you probably should have started 2 years ago. That would have been the best time to start. The second best time to start is today.
We're gonna go through two more questions. Mindful of the time, we're gonna go with the two last final questions for this session. We have a question from Thais. He's interested to know what industries do you believe will be most impacted by the EU AI Act?
Every.
I think
it's getting more complex if you are not just a trade company, but if you're also producing products which contains AI. So you have two lines, but every company will use AI in the future. I can't imagine any company which will survive the next 10 years without AI. So everyone is really impacted.
I'll answer it with a brief anecdote, and also shows the risks that companies have if they don't have policies and AI management systems. A few months ago, more than 6 months ago, I gave a lecture at a university in Switzerland in a course for managers, like an executive MBA. And there was a high-level manager of a big publicly traded company. And he told me after my lecture, I was like, this is all very interesting. We just started using ChatGPT internally in the company. It's all fine. We check the data protection, GDPR, like everything is fine. I was like, that sounds great. Yeah. Can you tell me about the use cases that you're using it for? And he said, we've started using it to improve our employee performance assessments. And of course, through that simple act, they created a high-risk AI system that will get him into so much legal trouble very, very shortly. So any company using technology that has AI in it is going to be affected.
Definitely. Last question is, how do you envision ISO 42001 and the EU AI Act evolving to keep pace with the rapid development in AI?
It's a political question. I think remains to be seen how the EU will update, if it even can or wants to. I think that's an open question. The pace of innovation is extremely fast. And so, for example, neither of these documents refers at all to agentic AI, which of course now is the next step of innovation. And one of the forums that I participate in is the AI Safety Institute at NIST in the United States. And this is one of the challenges that we face there in trying to write good technical standards and recommendations. The technology is moving so fast that standards bodies can barely keep up with those updates. Yeah. It's a real challenge.
Yeah, and I must agree. It's what is it? The tortoise and the hare. So you can't follow up really. Yeah, the AI development will always be much faster than the regulatory, and especially with all the politics within. Yeah, we just can hope that we can keep up a little bit at least. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I'd like to extend a big thank you to Marcus and Kevin for sharing their insights and expertise on this important topic. We truly appreciate the depth of knowledge and perspectives that you brought in today's discussion. And now, as a thank you for all of the attendees, we're offering a 20% discount on all of our TRECCERT 42001 certification programs, and you will receive an email after the webinar with all the detail. Thank you all once again for joining today. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you for supporting us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.